But this official looked at me and said, Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Lia's hands. Again, you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. Lia takes the trophy home. You go home empty-handed, end of story. We can eventually mail you one.
This is outrageous. This is disgusting. This is basic fairness is being trampled on, put through the shredder, burned in a bonfire, and then defecated on by the institutions that are supposed to be protecting young women like Riley Gaines. So Riley Gaines, the swimmer who has turned into an accidental activist over the transgender athletics policy, found herself on the Joe Rogan podcast the other day. And there's a section of this where she tells her story about what happened in that infamous NCAA race where she and the athlete known as Lia Thomas tied. People don't know that. You know, I think it was Keith Olbermann who in one of his unhinged drunken rants called Riley Gaines a loser and a mediocre athlete, and she's only popular, but, you know, she's like a 12-time All-American. And she literally tied the 6'4" man in this race. They finished with the exact same time. She is a national champion. I don't think people know that. I think they think she's out there as an activist because she lost. No, actually, that's not why. Do you know her whole story? She's told it before, but not the way she told it right here with Joe Rogan, and I want you to hear it.
Tied. We get out of the water. We go, yeah, you can see here, we both went 143.40. Not one of us going 143.39 or 143.41, tying. Get out of the water, go behind the awards podium. The NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself. Thomas, who is towering over me, right, 6'4", and this official looks at both of us and says, "Great job, you two. But you tied, and we only have one trophy, so we're gonna give the trophy to Lia. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." My
Jesus Christ.
Heart rate was still high, having just competed. My adrenaline was still pumping. And so the first thing that I thought ended up being the first thing that I said. And the first thought that I had was just what you had just said, right? Like, isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening? What do you mean you're going to give the trophy to the man in the women's 200 freestyle? I asked the question that no one dared ask all season. And I said, why? Which, of course, he didn't have an answer as to why. They didn't give him a script of what to say when someone asks you the dreaded question of why. And so his first excuse he came up with, he's stumbling on his words, and he's, well, we're actually just doing this in chronological order, he said. And so I said, okay, do you mean alphabetical? Because G comes before T. Otherwise, I literally have no idea what you're being chronological about, right? We tied. So again, what's your rationale here? And finally, he realized that he didn't have a justification. He didn't have an answer for this. And so, and I actually appreciate his honesty. This is when his face changed. He looked sad. His voice changed. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say. But this official looked at me and said, Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Lia's hands. Again, you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. Lia takes the trophy home. You go home empty-handed, end of story. We can eventually mail you one.
Oh my God.
Is what they said. So it was like that moment when I felt guilty at that point. I felt guilty for participating in the farce. I felt guilty for even getting in the water at this point. And so it kind of hit me. I won't say I was necessarily cowering, because I didn't feel like that to me. I wasn't necessarily scared to approach the topic. I just thought someone else would.
Okay, now there's more to this, and I do want to play more, but it's a good moment to take a break and sort of reflect on specifically what's going on here with Riley Gaines and as she tells the story. And I'm sure the anger and outrage that you're feeling right now. And also what I believe is sort of a bigger picture allegory here for where you and I are in this country with the powers that be from the political left. First, did you know that about this story? Did you know that they tied? Did you know that Lia Thomas, the 6'4" man who swam as a woman in this freestyle sprint race that Riley Gaines had trained her entire life for, that she had qualified in the SEC at University of Kentucky at the highest levels of American competition, just short of the Olympics, that she had actually fought her ass off and tied this guy. And her reward was to not have a trophy to go home with that day. Her reward was she had to sit back and see the man pose for the pictures and get all of the publicity for winning. And it was the institution. As you just heard, the person from the NCAA said we have been instructed that any pictures, if Lia Thomas is the winner, he gets the trophy. If you don't feel outraged, not just on behalf of Riley Gaines, but on behalf of all of the women who are right now being displaced in this country. And when we raise the issue and we say this is outrageous, this is disgusting, this is basic fairness is being trampled on, put through the shredder, burned in a bonfire, and then defecated on by the institutions that are supposed to be protecting young women like Riley Gaines. Basic fairness is thrown out the window for this political agenda that makes no logical sense. And our daughters are the ones who have to suffer because of it. How are you not outraged by this? We keep pointing this out and saying this, and we're told by all of the intellectual superiors in our life that make all the rules that we are forced to abide by, that this never happens. Oh, this is such a rare instance. It's a one-off. It's not. No, actually, it's happening more and more and more and more. And guess what? If it even happens once, it's wrong. I am outraged for Riley Gaines, yes. You know who else I'm outraged for? I'm outraged for the woman who worked just as many years as Riley Gaines and maybe in the qualifying rounds finished literally a split second slower than the 8 swimmers that made it to the finals. And that young woman didn't get a chance to compete because there was a man there competing as a woman. I am outraged for her. I am outraged for her parents who drove her to practice daily, early in the morning, if it's anything like my child who was a swimmer in high school. But the parents give because they want their daughter to think that they can do anything and they can achieve anything if they put their mind to it. And here's the thing about that. As a dad of 2 daughters, we tell our little girls that. We let them know that if they put their mind to it and they work, they can literally do anything they try to do. But we know when we say that to our daughters, then when it comes to certain things, well, they can't actually do anything they want. If it comes to certain things that require a basic type of strength and athletic ability, and they're trying to do something that a man is doing, they're not going to be able to do it as well. They're not going to be as strong or as fast and have the same physical ability that a man has. When we tell our daughters when they're growing up that if they just work hard, they can achieve anything, we know that it's within the confines of what other girls are attempting to do and trying to do. And we always had the faith in our institutions that our little girls would be protected from men intruding into that world so that we don't look like liars. Honey, you work hard, you put in the effort, you use the gifts that God gave you, you live right, you can do anything. And then here comes a man pretending to be a woman, and he walks away from the trophy. And Riley Gaines' dad is standing there looking at his daughter, saying, I'm sorry. I never imagined they would do this. I'm sorry. That's the heartbreaking reality that we are now forced to face because of the cultural Marxists who are forcing this issue into our society for no reason. Nobody needs this. We can function perfectly without it. But then the allegory. You know what? I'm going to take a quick sip of water. We're going to watch the end of this, and then we'll talk bigger picture about what Riley Gaines' story actually means, even well beyond the transgender issue here, with regard to where you and I are in this country right now, with the political and cultural shifts that they are forcing on us. Here's Riley Gaines finishing up her story.
I thought a coach would say something. I thought some other swimmer. I thought someone with political power, someone within the NCAA. Quite honestly, I thought someone's dad would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms. But it was in that moment where we were standing on the podium, myself included. I'm standing on the podium and we're clapping and we're smiling and we're cheering. And it hit me. I'm like, what in the world are we clapping for? Because, I mean, really what we're applauding is our own erasure, our own demolition. And so it was right then and there that, again, like a slap across the face, I was like, how in the world can we as women, as female athletes, expect someone to stand up for us if we aren't even willing to stand up for us? Like, this has to come from us.
Really fantastic stuff. And Riley Gaines is, I mean, every time you see her, you just want to celebrate and cheer and say, go girl, go. And she's attracting more and more and more people and other female athletes to her cause. And she is literally going to change the narrative on this story and change this country, change the NCAA policies, and ultimately, I think, change the world because of her activism, because she's telling her story. There's something bigger here. What she just described is very specific to the transgender athletes intruding on women's private spaces and on their competition at the high school collegiate level, right? It's very narrow. But it also represents everything that we are facing right now. Do you ever feel when you see the headlines that it's insurmountable? We're drinking out of a fire hose, whether it's the transgender activism, whether it's the critical race theory stuff, whether it's the border, whether it's the economy, whether it's the education and curriculum that's being forced onto our kids, the crime issues, all of it. You can look at every single one of those issues and you can draw a direct line from the problems we're experiencing right now in our country to warped, misguided, quasi, if not full-on Marxist policies that have been implemented by elected officials or unelected officials. I mean, the transgender issue is obvious there, right? When you look at what our school boards and our other institutions have forced onto our culture and our society in the name of equity or equality or what have you. Same with the curriculum, the critical race theory stuff, the marches, the defund the police movements, the reallocation of resources and policies from law enforcement so that they don't arrest, or if they are arresting criminals, then you've got the prosecutors who won't prosecute them and put them back out on the streets. The border, of course, is a perfect example of this as well, where we in Western civilization have known for centuries that a nation has every right and responsibility to protect its borders and maintain its borders. And yet it takes a cultural Marxist radical left-wing ideology to inject this asinine idea that borders and walls that protect borders are in some way racist and wrong and inappropriate. And if you ask the Democrats right now, who doesn't have the right to come to this country from around the world, they can't answer that question because they don't think anyone should be excluded. It literally makes no sense. None of it makes sense. Our economic policies right now are driven by radical left-wing ideologues in Washington, D.C., who are injecting their political and philosophical agenda onto basic market economics. If they just got the hell out of the way and let businesses thrive, we'd thrive and our economy would be great. How do I know? Because in my lifetime, it's happened 3 times under Reagan, under W. Bush, and under Trump. They get into office, they say, let's just let the economy go. Let's stop trying to tinker with it. Let's get the government out, and everything goes great. To national security issues right now, where, I'm sorry, if you look at the Middle East right now and you think that, well, both sides have a point here in the whole Israel-Hamas thing, you have a broken moral compass. I could go on and on and on, but everything you are worried about right now in our society, from great geopolitical national security issues to the most micro of micro issues with your children's education in your kids' school, it all has the hidden hand of radical left-wing ideologues. It's actually not very hidden, pushing their agenda and injecting it into a society that we had built pretty nicely here and into cultural norms that we knew worked. Why do we have homeless in the streets and people living in tents? Why? Not because we think it's good for them, not because we think society is just fine if we allow people to sleep on the streets and live on the streets and defecate on the streets. No, we've known for centuries that creates crime and mayhem and disease. It takes somebody with an advanced degree in a liberal arts college to inject their Marxist ideology. Well, this is a problem with affordable housing. So until you can provide a home for an individual, regardless of whether they have an income or not, then we're just going to have to let them live on the streets and ruin our society. The hell is that? There's an easy way to solve it. Make it a criminal activity and arrest the people who break the law and put them in jail. Guess what? As soon as you start doing that, people stop living on the streets and people stop shoplifting and people stop breaking your border laws and they stop living and working illegally in this country because you're going to start enforcing the law. And men will stop trying to compete against women because you've got rules and standards and you say, no, a man is a person with male body parts and a woman is a person with female body parts. And we have 2 different criteria for their athletic competitions. You lay down rules, enforce the rules, and suddenly order comes back to society. That's the through line through all of these problems. And what Riley Gaines demonstrates is Toto the dog pulling back the curtain and showing the man behind it operating the Wizard of Oz mechanisms. You just heard her say, I was waiting for somebody to do something about this. I was waiting for, you know what? It's the scene from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. When they turn back time, and Harry's standing there waiting for his dad to do the spell that will get rid of the things that were the Dementors that were attacking he and Sirius Black. And then he realizes, wait a minute, I'm sitting here waiting for my dad to do it because I thought I saw my dad doing it, but it wasn't him, it was me. And he realizes he's got to do it. That's Riley Gaines. She was waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody to step up and do something about it, realized it wasn't happening, and says, oh, I guess that means it's me. And I think you know where I'm going with this. It's time for you to step up. It's time for you to be inspired by Riley Gaines. It's time for you to do your Patronus charm and put this place back where it belongs. Because we've all been waiting and waiting for some sanity. We've all been waiting and waiting for people to step up and say, no. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We don't need to upend our society. We don't need to allow all of these things to go to hell. We had things pretty good in this country, and there were a lot of things that we just sort of relied on, like the basics. What's the difference between a man and a woman? And You know, if you break the law, you get arrested and you get put in jail. That worked out pretty well. Time to go back to it. But it does. It takes us. It takes us. It takes us. It takes you. It takes me. It takes Riley Gaines. It takes courage. It takes Nancy Mace to stand up to George Stephanopoulos. It takes us to stand up courageously and say, no, an illegal immigrant is an illegal immigrant. And you're not going to tell me what words I'm allowed to use. It takes all of us. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there together.